It could be sitting in a jar.in drawer. Or quietly passing through your hands every single day, unnoticed. A small, copper coin stamped with a simple D. The 1951 D Lincoln cent. At first glance, it's ordinary, common, forgettable. But what if I told you that certain versions of this coin have triggered bidding wars, stunned collectors, and, in rare cases, sparked rumors of values climbing into life-changing territory? What if the penny you've ignored your entire life isn't just a penny? It's a test. A hidden opportunity. And maybe, just maybe, the most overlooked treasure in modern American coinage. Because the story of the 1951 D Lincoln cent is not what it seems, and once you see it, you'll never look at your spare change the same way again. Let's go back to 1951. America was booming. Post-war optimism was everywhere. Factories were running, people were spending, and the Denver Mint was working overtime to keep up with demand. That year alone, over 625 million Lincoln cents rolled out of Denver. $600 million. Think about that. With numbers like that, you'd assume every single 1951 D penny is practically worthless today, and for most of them, you'd be right. But here's where the story twists. Because buried within those hundreds of millions are subtle, nearly invisible anomalies, coins that slip through quality control, coins that shouldn't exist in the form they do, coins that collectors obsess over, coins that can turn a single cent into something far more powerful. So what separates a 1-cent coin from one worth hundreds, or even thousands, of dollars? Details. Tiny microscopic details. The kind most people never notice. Let's start with condition. Because condition is everything. A worn 1951 D penny? Worth maybe a few cents, but a pristine example, what collectors call mint state, that's where things begin to escalate. Sharp details. Full luster. Nowhere. Coins graded at the very top levels, MS-66, MS-67, have sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars at auction. And then there are the elite, the nearly perfect coins, the ones that look like they were struck yesterday. These are the coins that ignite competition, the coins that make collectors lean forward and whisper, "This is the one!" But condition alone isn't the full story, because sometimes it's not about perfection. It's about imperfection. Errors, mistakes, flaws. The very things the mint tried to eliminate are now the very things that can make a coin extraordinary. Take the repunched mint mark, for example. On some 1951 D cents, the D wasn't punched cleanly the first time, so the mint worker struck it again. The result? A slightly doubled, shadow-like D beneath the main one. To the untrained eye, it's nothing. To a collector, it's a signal. A clue. A rare variation that transforms an ordinary coin into something far more desirable. And that's just the beginning. There are die cracks, thin lines running across the surface like fractures in time. There are die chips, small raised blobs of metal where the die itself began to break down. There are weak strikes, off-center strikes, and subtle doubling in the lettering that can go completely unnoticed unless you know exactly where to look. And here's the unsettling truth: most people don't, which means these coins continue to circulate. They get spent, lost, forgotten. Or worse, thrown into coin machines without a second thought. Imagine that. A potentially valuable coin, reduced to a blur in a counting machine, gone, just like that. Now here's where things get even more intriguing. You may have heard whispers, stories floating around online, claims that certain Lincoln cents have sold for staggering amounts, hundreds of thousands, even approaching $1 million. And yes, while those headline-grabbing sales are typically tied to ultra-rare coins like the 1943 bronze cent or the 1944 steel cent, those stories create something powerful: awareness, because they force one simple question into your mind: what if something valuable is hiding in plain sight? And that question changes everything. Because once you start looking, you start seeing. You notice the dates, the mint marks, the subtle differences. You begin to understand that coins are not just currency. They're artifacts. Each one carries a story. A moment in time. A human error frozen in metal. And, occasionally, an opportunity. Now let's talk about the number that gets people's attention. The one that sparks curiosity. The one that makes people dig through their drawers late at night. $844,000. It's a figure often mentioned in discussions about rare pennies. A shocking, almost unbelievable price. But here's the reality. That kind of sale is extraordinarily rare and tied to specific, ultra-unique coins with historical significance and extreme rarity. The 1951 Lincoln cent, by comparison, lives in a different category. But don't let that fool you, because within its category, it still has power. A top-grade 1951 penny with exceptional quality or a notable error can command impressive prices, far beyond face value, hundreds, thousands, and in the right circumstances, even more. But here's the real takeaway. Value isn't just about the coin. It's about recognition. Because a rare coin that goes unnoticed is just a coin. But the moment someone identifies it, the moment someone understands what they're holding, that's when everything changes. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you actually looked at your coins? Not glanced, not counted, looked, examined the date, checked the mint mark, held it under light, and searched for something unusual. Because the difference between someone who finds value and someone who doesn't isn't luck. It's attention. Right now, across the country, millions of 1951 Lincoln cents are still out there. In circulation. In jars. In collections that haven't been touched in decades. And among them are coins with stories, coins with errors, coins waiting to be discovered. And here's the twist most people never consider. The people who find these coins, they're not experts. They're not professional collectors. They're ordinary individuals who decided, just once, to take a closer look. A closer look. That's all it takes. Because the next time you receive change, the next time you walk past that jar of coins, the next time you almost ignore a penny, you'll remember this. You'll remember that somewhere, hidden in plain sight, are coins that defy expectations, coins that challenge assumptions, coins that remind us that value is often disguised as the ordinary. And maybe, just maybe, you'll pick one up, turn it over, check the date, look for that tiny D, and wonder, is this the one? Because sometimes, the smallest things carry the biggest surprises, and sometimes, a single penny is anything but. But what if that tiny piece of copper or steel was actually worth thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars? What if the coin you've ignored for years could quietly change your financial future? Because for a rare few, that's exactly what happened. And tonight, you're about to see why the 1944 no-mint mark Lincoln cent is one of the most misunderstood and potentially life-changing coins in American history. Let's start with something simple but powerful. In 1944, the United States was deep in World War II. Resources were tight. Copper was desperately needed for ammunition and military equipment. In 1943, the U.S. Mint made a radical decision. They stopped using copper entirely and struck pennies out of zinc-coated steel. Those 1943 steel cents are famous today, but here's where things take a sharp, unexpected turn. In 1944, the mint switched back to copper, using recycled shell casings from the war effort. Billions of pennies were struck that year, most of them at the Philadelphia Mint, which means no mint mark, and that's exactly why so many people overlook them. An mint mark. Common, right? Not so fast. Because hidden among those billions are coins that should never have existed, coins struck on the wrong metal, coins born from mistakes, coins that slipped through the cracks of wartime chaos. and made their way into circulation. Let me ask you something. What if a 1944 penny looks normal, but isn't? What if it's not copper at all? What if it's steel? That's the first major twist. And it's the one that has stunned collectors for decades. A handful of 1944 Lincoln cents were accidentally struck on leftover steel planchets from 1943. These rare error coins are among the most valuable pennies ever discovered. And when one shows up, the market reacts instantly. We're not talking about a few $100s. We're talking about numbers that stop people in their tracks. One of these 1944 steel cents has reportedly sold for as much as $844,000 in top condition. Think about that for a moment. $844,000 for a penny. And here's the unsettling part. At a glance, it doesn't look dramatically different, unless you know exactly what to look for. You could spend it without a second thought. So how do you tell? Simple test. Grab a magnet. A normal 1944 penny won't react. It's copper. No magnetism, but a rare steel version. It snaps to the magnet instantly. That tiny reaction, that almost invisible detail, could be the difference between 1 cent and a life-changing payday. Now pause for a second. How many times have you handled pennies without checking? How many coins have slipped through your fingers unnoticed? That's where the story gets even deeper. Because the 1944 no-mint marked Lincoln cent isn't just about the steel error. It's about layers of hidden value. Subtle imperfections. Tiny anomalies that most people will never see. Take doubling, for example. Some 1944 pennies exhibit what collectors call double die errors, where the design was stamped twice, slightly offset. The result? Letters that look thicker, numbers that appear shadowed, details that seem almost alive. To the untrained eye, it's nothing. To a collector, it's a signal. A clue. A potential jackpot. Then there are off-center strikes. Coins where Lincoln's face is shifted, where the date hugs the edge, where the entire design feels slightly wrong. These mistakes weren't supposed to happen, but during wartime production, speed mattered more than perfection, and that urgency created opportunity. Opportunity that still exists today, because here's the truth most people don't realize. These coins are still out there. They haven't all been found. They haven't all been locked away in vaults or private collections. Some are sitting in circulation. Some are mixed into old collections that haven't been examined in decades. Some are waiting, quietly, for the right person to notice them. And that brings us to the most important question of all. Why do some of these coins reach such staggering values? It's not just rarity. It's condition. Collectors call it braid. And this is where things get really interesting. A worn 1944 penny. Maybe a few cents. A well-preserved one? A few dollars. But a flawless example. Sharp details, original luster, untouched surfaces. That's where the numbers start climbing. Fast. Because collectors aren't just buying coins. They're buying history, preserved in its purest form. And when a rare error meets near-perfect condition, that's when records are broken. That's when auctions heat up. That's when a single coin can spark a bidding war that pushes its value into the hundreds of thousands. And occasionally, beyond. Now here's a thought that might surprise you. Some experts believe there are still undiscovered high-grade examples sitting in old coin rolls, tucked away in bank boxes, or hidden in inherited collections that no one has carefully inspected. Coins that haven't seen the light of day in 50, 60, even 70 years. Imagine being the first person to open that roll. Imagine spotting that one coin, slightly different, slightly unusual. Would you recognize it? Or would it slip by, just like it has for decades? That's the tension. That's the opportunity. And that's why this story matters. Because it's not just about a coin. It's about awareness. It's about knowing what others overlook. It's about seeing value where no one else is looking. Right now, millions of Americans have jars of loose change, boxes of old coins, collections passed down from parents or grandparents. Most of it is ignored, dismissed, forgotten. But hidden inside those collections could be something extraordinary. A 1944 no-mint Mark Lincoln cent that isn't what it appears. A coin with a secret. A coin with a story. A coin with a value that could shock you. So before you move on, before you forget this moment, ask yourself one simple question. What's sitting in your house right now? Because the difference between ordinary and extraordinary might be as small as a penny. Check the date. Check the metal. Use a magnet. Look closer than you ever have before. Because history has already proven one thing. Fortunes don't always arrive in obvious ways. Sometimes, they're hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough, patient enough, and observant enough to finally see them. Somewhere in America, right now, a penny is sitting in a jar, a drawer, maybe even your pocket, worth more than a luxury home. Not a rare gold coin. Not a centuries-old artifact. A simple Lincoln cent dated 1941. An mint mark. And in the right condition, with the right hidden traits, it has stunned collectors with values climbing as high as $844,000. Let that sink in. A coin most people would toss into a tip jar, quietly commanding a price that rivals a lifetime of savings. So here's the question that should be echoing in your mind right now. What if you've already held one and didn't even know it? Because the truth about the 1941 no-mint Mark Lincoln cent isn't just about age or rarity. It's about secrets. Secrets hidden in plain sight. And once you see them, you'll never look at your spare change the same way again. The year is 1941. America stands on the edge of World War II. Industry is surging. The Philadelphia Mint is working relentlessly, producing hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents to keep commerce flowing. And that's the first twist. This coin was never meant to be rare. In fact, the 1941 Lincoln cent with no mint mark, meaning it was struck in Philadelphia, had a massive mintage. Over 887 million coins rolled off the presses. Nearly $1 billion. So how could something so common become so valuable? That's where the story begins to fracture, and the mystery deepens. Because not all 1941 pennies are created equal. Most are worth exactly what you'd expect. A cent, maybe a few cents more. But a tiny fraction, a nearly invisible group, carries characteristics that transform them into collector legends. And these differences are so subtle, so easy to miss, that millions have slipped through people's hands unnoticed for decades. Now imagine this. A coin passes through thousands of transactions over 80 years. Grocery stores, gas stations, piggy banks, estate sales, each time dismissed as ordinary, until one day, someone looks closer, and everything changes. So what are these hidden traits? What separates a 1-cent coin from a six-figure treasure? It starts with condition. Collectors use a grading scale, and at the very top sits a category called mint state. This means the coin shows no wear, no damage from circulation. It looks almost exactly as it did the moment it was struck. But even within mint state, there are levels. MS60, MS63, MS65, and then the elite. MS67, MS68. At those levels, we're talking about coins so pristine, so sharply detailed, that they appear nearly flawless under magnification. And here's the kicker. The higher the grade, the rarer the coin becomes. Exponentially rarer. Out of hundreds of millions minted, only a microscopic number survive in near-perfect condition. And when one does appear, collectors don't hesitate. That's how a 1941 no-mint Mark Lincoln cent reached a staggering sale price of $844,000. Not because it was supposed to be rare, but because it survived perfectly. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself this. How many coins have passed through your life that you never examined closely? Because condition is just the beginning. There's another layer to this story. One that takes things from valuable to extraordinary. Errors. Minting errors are the accidents that turn ordinary coins into anomalies, and collectors love anomalies because errors are unpredictable, unrepeatable, often unnoticed, and the 1941 Lincoln cent is no exception. Some of these coins exhibit what experts call double die features. This happens during the creation of the coin's die, the tool that stamps the design. If there's even a slight misalignment during the process, it can create a doubling effect on the lettering or the date. But here's the twist. The doubling isn't always obvious. It might appear as a faint shadow on the words Liberty, or a subtle duplication in God We Trust. Easy to overlook, unless you know exactly what to look for. And when you do, you're not just holding a penny anymore. You're holding a mistake, frozen in metal, from over 80 years ago. Other 1941 cents show off center strikes. Imagine the design shifted just enough so that part of the coin is blank, while the rest is compressed into a smaller area. It looks wrong, because it is wrong, and that's precisely why it's valuable. Then, there are die cracks, raised lines that snake across the surface like lightning bolts. Or planchet errors, where the metal blank itself was flawed before it was even struck. Each one tells a story. A moment inside the mint, where something didn't go according to plan, and instead of being discarded, it escaped into circulation, into history, into your reach. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Color. Yes, color. Lincoln cents from this era were made of copper. And over time, copper changes. It darkens. It tones. It reacts to the environment. Most old pennies you'll find are brown. That's normal. But collectors categorize these coins into three color groups: brown, red-brown, and red. And red is where the magic happens. A full red 1941 Lincoln cent means it has retained its original mint luster, that bright, fiery copper color, for over 8 decades. That's incredibly rare, because copper doesn't stay red forever. So when a coin does, it becomes a time capsule, and collectors will pay a premium for that. Untouched brilliance. Combine a high grade with a full red designation, and suddenly you're not just in the thousands. You're in the tens of thousands, maybe more. And if that coin also has a striking error, now you're entering territory where prices can skyrocket beyond expectation. This is where reality starts to feel almost unreal, because the difference between a 1-cent coin and a life-changing discovery often comes down to details you can barely see. A sharper line, a cleaner surface, a tiny shift in lettering. That's it. That's all it takes. And yet most people never look. They assume, they dismiss, they overlook, which leads to a simple but powerful truth. The rarest treasures are often hiding in the most ordinary places. Right now, somewhere in the country, a 1941 no-mint mark Lincoln cent is sitting unrecognized, maybe in a coin jar, maybe in a forgotten collection, maybe in a roll from the bank, waiting for someone who knows what to look for, someone who understands that value isn't always obvious, that sometimes it's hidden in plain sight. So here's the moment of truth. What are you going to do the next time you see a penny? Will you toss it aside without a second thought? Or will you pause, turn it over, check the date, examine the details? Because the difference between those two choices could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more. The 1941 no-mint mark Lincoln cent isn't just a coin. It's a reminder that history still circulates, that mistakes can become masterpieces, and that life-changing opportunities don't always announce themselves. Sometimes, they're disguised as something you've seen 1,000 times before. So check your coins. Look closer, because the next time you hear someone say, "It's just a penny," you'll know better. And who knows, the next record-breaking sale might start in your pocket. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a single penny, and discovering it could be worth more than your house. It sounds impossible. It sounds like one of those stories you hear and dismiss. But for a select few coins, hidden in plain sight for decades, that possibility is very real, and one of the most talked about, most misunderstood, and most intriguing of them all is the 1957 D Lincoln cent. At first glance, it's ordinary. Copper. Worn. Common. Millions were minted in Denver that year, over $1 billion, in fact. So how could something so abundant carry whispers of shocking value, even rumors of six-figure sales? The answer lies in what most people never see, because with coins like this, the real story isn't on the surface. It's in the details. The tiny, almost invisible differences that separate a 1-cent coin from a life-changing discovery. And once you know what to look for, you'll never see your spare change the same way again. The year was 1957. America was booming. Cars were bigger, families were growing, and coins flowed freely through every diner, gas station, and corner store in the country. The Denver Mint was working at full speed, striking Lincoln cents by the millions every single day. Most of those coins were perfect, or close enough, but not all of them. Some slipped through with subtle flaws. Others carried mistakes that no one noticed at the time. And a very small number left the mint with characteristics that collectors today would fight over. So what makes a 1957 D Lincoln cent special? It's not just one thing. It's a combination of factors: condition, strike quality, color, and most importantly, errors. Let's start with condition. Most 1957 D pennies you'll find today are worn. They've been in circulation for decades, passed from hand to hand, scraped, dulled, and faded. Those are worth, well, a penny. Maybe a few cents more. But if you find one in pristine condition, what collectors call mint state, everything changes. Suddenly, that same coin could be worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Why? Because untouched coins from that era are incredibly rare. Think about it. How many people in 1957 carefully set aside brand new pennies, protecting them from wear for nearly 70 years? Very few. And that scarcity drives value. But condition alone isn't the whole story. Because even among high-grade coins, there's another layer of rarity that can send prices soaring. Color. Yes, color. A freshly minted Lincoln cent has a bright, fiery red appearance. Over time, exposure to air and handling turns that red into brown. Most old pennies you see today are brown or a mix of red and brown, but a true, red, 1957 D cent, one that has retained its original luster for decades, is something else entirely. Collectors prize these coins. They chase them. And when one appears in top condition, bidding can become intense. Now here's where things start to get really interesting. Because beyond condition and color lies the world of errors. And this is where ordinary coins become extraordinary. One of the most famous Lincoln cent errors comes from the same year, 1957, but from the Philadelphia Mint, the 1957 double die obverse. That coin shows dramatic doubling in the lettering and date, and it is sold for significant sums. But here's the twist. While the Denver minted 1957 D doesn't have a widely recognized major double die like its Philadelphia counterpart, it still carries its own share of hidden anomalies, subtle doubling, die chips, repunchment marks, and strike irregularities. These aren't always obvious. In fact, many people spend years handling these coins without ever noticing them. But once you know what to look for, you can't unsee it. Imagine spotting a faint doubling in the word Liberty, or noticing that the D mint mark looks slightly off, tilted, thicker, or even doubled. To most people, it's nothing. To a collector, it could mean everything, because these small variations can transform a common coin into a collectible one. And in the right condition, with the right features, the value climbs fast. Now, you may have heard stories, headlines claiming coins like this have sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even figures like $844,000 get thrown around, sparking excitement and disbelief. So what's the truth? The reality is this. While a standard 1957 D Lincoln cent has not reached those extreme prices, the broader Lincoln cent market has seen extraordinary sales, especially for ultra-rare errors and near-perfect specimens. And that's the key. Not every coin is valuable. But the right coin, in the right condition, with the right characteristics, that's where history is made. And here's the part most people overlook. These coins are still out there. They're not locked away in museums. They're not all in private collections. Some are sitting in jars, drawers, and old piggy banks across the country, maybe even in your home. Think about that for a moment. How many times have you ignored a penny? Tossed it aside? Left it in a cup holder or a kitchen drawer? What if one of those coins held something rare? What if one tiny detail, one overlooked feature, was the difference between 1 cent and a collector's prize? This is where curiosity turns into opportunity, because finding a valuable coin isn't about luck alone. It's about awareness. It's about slowing down, taking a closer look, and asking the right questions. Does the coin still have its original red color? Is the strike sharp and well-defined? Are there any unusual markings, doubling, chips, or irregularities? Is the mint mark perfectly normal or slightly off? Each question brings you closer to the answer, and sometimes that answer is surprising. There are collectors who have built entire portfolios starting with pocket change. People who trained their eyes, learned the details, and turned overlooked coins into valuable finds, not overnight, but steadily. Because once you understand what to look for, every coin becomes a possibility. Every handful of change becomes a hunt. And every 1957 D Lincoln cent becomes more than just a penny. It becomes a question waiting to be answered. Is this one ordinary, or is it something more? That's the tension. That's the thrill. And that's why stories like this continue to capture attention decades later. Because they remind us that value isn't always obvious. That something small, something easily ignored, can hold unexpected potential. So the next time you see a penny, don't dismiss it. Turn it over. Look at the date. Check for that small D beneath the year. Examine the surface, the color, the details. Ask yourself, what am I really holding? Because somewhere out there, someone will find a coin that changes everything for them. And when they do, it won't be because they were lucky. It will be because they were paying attention. And that possibility, that quiet, persistent possibility, is what keeps collectors searching, learning, and looking just a little bit closer. So check your coins. Not casually, carefully, because the difference between ordinary and extraordinary might already be in your hands.